Happy Arbor Day, everyone. Today I'm talking to Xa'nalas, Dakota Smith. He is a member of the
Kwakwaka'wakw First Nations.
Specifically the Namgis and Mamtatgila tribes. He is a facilitator of learning with the Sierra Club BC education team. I am talking to him about protecting BC's old growth forests. First, though, I want to acknowledge that I'm speaking from the traditional territory of many nations, including the Mississaugas of the Credit, the Anishinaabe, the Chippewa, the Haudenosaunee, and the Wendat peoples, and is now home to many diverse First Nations, Inuit, and Métis people. Hi, Dr. Dakota Smith.
Hi.
Hello.
Hi.
In British Columbia, forests are being logged at an unsustainable rate, leading to loss of biodiversity, increased carbon emissions, and human rights conflicts. Why are these forests so important?
Well, for one, they clean our air. For another reason, they are home to or a lot of animals. For instance, the marbled murrelet, who needs old growth to live in and to thrive in. So they are diverse ecosystems for all types of animals. And if we got rid of all the old growth forests, then we would start losing some of animals, we call our neighbors, relatives. And another reason is their cultural significance to First Nations peoples. Cedar tree needs to be 500 years old if you make a canoe out of it, So it's they have so many different reasons of importance, right? So that's why they're so important to the animal communities, to Indigenous communities, and everybody who lives. Specifically talking about Vancouver Island or BC, the communities that live there, because if we take too much, it'll change the climate, and we won't be, we're supposed to be living in a rainforest here on Vancouver Island, and it won't be quite a rainforest without a forest.
How big are these trees and how old are they?
Yeah, that varies. Second and third growth trees are usually really like around 60 to 150 years, whereas our old growth forests, again, like I said, a tree needs to be about 500. A cedar tree needs to be about 500 years old before we make a totem pole or a canoe out of it, right? So we're talking minimum 500, and I'd say the oldest tree recorded in BC would be around Port Alberni. So that's Xa'nalas territory, right? So on Vancouver Island, we got three nations: the Kwakwaka'wakw in the north, it's my nation, and then the Xa'nalas on the west coast, and the Salish on the southern tip of Vancouver Island. Well, so Port Alberni they call it the Chiwot tree, I believe. And that tree they took a sample of it and they recorded it as 2,000 years old. With 60 feet diameter. All right. So that was a red cedar too. So that's what you can get, right? And the importance, right, of these trees, sometimes people will say, well, the old growth is just going to fall down anyways. But if they fall down, they become nurse logs, right? And all their nutrients and stuff goes into the earth. And that's why, you can't replant an old growth forest. You can't make a new one. So when they talk about planting trees for everyone they cut or whatever, it's like that might be true, but a lot of those are just to be cut in the next 60 years. And again, like old growth forest has so much nutrients and information that it, like, all the stuff goes into the earth and it feeds all the plants around it, right?
Yeah.
So that's like more of the importance of our old growth forests. There's like it's so important, and you feel the difference. You're in a cut block, and it's hot. You got your jacket around your waist. You're in shorts, and then you walk into the forest, and all of a sudden the canopy, it's cold, right? You got to put your coat back on, and you feel the difference instantly of the climate, and you realize like that's a real life example of how we're actually changing the climate around us.
Because it's hotter where the trees aren't there, and it's a little bit colder where trees are there.
Right, right. They clean our air, right? And you know what you're seeing now more and more is that they have oxygen bars, places where you can pay for like clean air, right? And so that's another aspect of climate change is that some people will be sitting pretty. They'll have what they need to be healthy, but the people with more money, they won't have to worry about those effects, right? They'll have everything they need at their fingertips.
People say saving old trees is much better than planting new ones. How much of this forest with these beautiful old trees is left?
Old growth on Vancouver Island, 2.7%.
Wow.
Okay, that's very small. That's 2.7% left of the old growth forests. With my dad, who's in his 60s, about 64, when he was a kid, and they were in Victoria, to get to our home in Alert Bay, that's a 40-minute ferry ride from Port McNeill. He would have to stop at Campbell River. That's about the halfway point to McNeill. And they'd have to catch a ferry up there. That's how logging roads passed there. That's how much more forest there was when he was a kid, like your age. But now, when I was a kid, I remember driving up and down the highway, and there was a buffer between all the clear cuts. Like you couldn't. It was trees and trees and trees, and that's like all I saw. But now, me and a lot of the people from my hometown, we talk about how we're driving down the highway, and they're not even hiding anymore. The buffers are so thin, and then the clear cuts are just right along the highway now. So we're seeing the real life changes in each generation, right?
Yeah.
So it's real sad to see what's being taken and from our territories, without permission.
Yeah. How do these forests fight climate change?
Already, like I said, like you take down these forests and then you're changing the climate, right? It's supposed to be a rainforest, right? And so that's kind of, I feel like it's more rainy on the North Island. That's because of how much of the natural environment we have intact left. And like keeping our territories. There's no universal like movement for environmentalism to like say for climate change, really.
Yeah.
The one key factor that connects everything would be all the First Nations people and all the First Nations who are actively trying to protect their culture and traditions, and in doing so, they're protecting their local environments, right? As they protect these local environments, right, we're protecting, stopping climate change all collectively. So protecting these indigenous rights actually is protecting the climate, which is protecting everybody who lives on this earth, right? It's not just indigenous people. It's settlers, immigrants, people, all kinds of people from different backgrounds and cultures live in these rural areas and in the cities, right? Yep. So protecting these indigenous rights, protecting these forests, lessening the carbon footprint that's left by corporations who are overlogging, right? It's not like we're saying don't log anything. We're saying leave the old growth. We have enough tree farms. So they're farms. Yeah. And if they laid out a plan they could do it responsibly. But like I said before, there's no real need for a plan if they don't, if they feel like some people can live in comfort, right? So it becomes a class issue.
Yeah. What are they being cut down for?
I believe when it comes to old growth, a lot of it goes to like fancy shingles and stuff you would see in like upper class neighborhoods. Their archways and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Yeah, but smaller trees, second growth trees and stuff like that. That's like your toilet paper and stuff like that.
Yeah. What is the status of the logging plans right now?
That is a good question because it's not so cut. No pun intended. Because, for instance, we have a lot of deferrals going through right now on Vancouver Island, a lot of them proposed by Indigenous nations, right? But what we have seen is evidence of logging companies that are logging in the areas that have been proposed for these deferrals before they go through, all right? So they're kind of sneaking in there beforehand to legally cut them before they're told no. And I would say dishonorable. It's sneaky, and it's a way that they're trying to beat the system to make as much money as fast as possible. Yeah. And there's, you've heard the saying, out of sight, out of mind. Yeah. Well, I'm gonna say it like there's a lot of people and industries who will do something illegal if they know they can get away with it, because there's no real live monitoring of these clear cuts where they're cutting down. And like sometimes you come across somewhere and you're like, me, like I work in the education sector, but I did forestry as well. And like I'm always going through my territories, and I see stuff that's shady and shouldn't be going through. And there's not a lot you can do about that. So the plans that they have and the way that they act, it can be kind of two different things, right? But it looks like business as usual, and take as much as you can to cash it.
Yeah. What sort of Indigenous knowledge could help manage these forests?
Right. Well, that's the other thing, is that, we've been here, these our indigenous nations have been here for the recordings of village at least 15,000 years ago along this coast. Some are even older. And so that's just your recording, and that's an established village site. So you got to think that back when it was first being made, so even longer before that. And our culture, our songs, and our dances, they all reinforce our relationship with our local environments. We had reciprocal relationships versus a dominance relationship, which the corporate world seems to have, right? And so we always talk about balance and only taking as what you need, right? And we have the relationships with the trees and the medicines that we use. We pray before we harvest anything, right? So we make that intimate connection with our land and the animals. When we're hunting like an elk, we pray for it at the end, thank it for giving its life to us, to give us life. So that's a symbiotic relationship, right? You do something like the animal is feeding you, but you don't take too much from that herd of elk, or you don't take too much from the ocean when you're fishing. A lot of our fishermen, will let a week go of the first salmon run or whatever fish run is going through to ensure that there will be enough to reproduce for next season, right? So it's about conservationism, and we've always instilled that in our culture and in our morals, conservationism, right? So this kind of a newer term for the corporate world, the settler world, and you know, like settlers have come here and occupied these territories for just over 500 years. Meanwhile, our people have been here for thousands and thousands of years, and we've practiced these relationships with the land, right? And so you can't really walk into somebody else's home and tell them that you all of a sudden know how to handle it and manage it in a better way when you don't know the specifics of delay there, right? So that's just listening to these to the indigenous people of their specific areas, right? You know, we did things called controlled burns, right? And that would, we actually burn down parts of the forest, and that would make it so that that would make a less likelihood of wildfires going like rampant wildfires like we've been seeing a lot lately. For instance, national parks, that was created, and they kicked indigenous people out of these territories where they lived and harvested out of these national, and they created national parks, not realizing that we used them and utilized them and took care of them in a way, especially with controlled burns and stuff. And so again, that's why part of the reason for the rampant wildfires we've been seeing the past few years is people not knowing how to take care of it, not realizing indigenous people were taking care of it prior to colonization. And yeah, so that's one of the factors on top of climate change. Right? So that's a good example.
Yeah. Thanks so much for joining me today, Dr. Dakota Smith. Click the link below to support the important work the Sierra Club is doing. And remember, together kids can save the world. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.